The story kept spreading. On 100 worlds, people who had bowed their heads to the Empire began to straighten their backs. They saw that the giant was not a god. He was just a man on a tall throne, and someone had just thrown a stone that hit him right between the eyes. Weeks passed. On Pyrrhus, General Hana was in her command post once again looking at maps and reports. The red sector on her map, the one that represented their small alliance, was growing. New lines were being drawn. New ships were joining their fleet. Ji-hoon entered with a new message. "The latest intelligence from the core," he said. "The Monarch has canceled his planned offensive. His fleets are being repositioned to defend his inner systems. He is digging in. He is scared." Hana looked up from her map. She thought about the cold throne room, the silent courtiers, and the ruler who had thought himself a god. She thought of the 2 assassins who had come in the night believing they were ghosts. "He is not scared of me, Ji-hoon," she said softly. "He is scared of what I represent. He is scared of humanity. He is scared of our stubbornness, our refusal to know when we are beaten." She turned back to her work, her face calm in the screen's glow. The war was far from over. There would be more battles, more fighting, more loss, but something had changed. The tide had turned. The Galaxy Monarch had learned a lesson that many of Earth's old tyrants had learned too late. You can threaten a man, you can break his body, but you cannot break his spirit. And when you push a human into a corner, you do not get surrender. You get a fight. And humanity as a species had a very long history of winning fights everyone said they would lose. The message had been sent. And it had been received. The throne room of Monarch Valerius was a place of perfect order. The crystal walls pulsed with their soft, steady light. The courtiers stood in their silent rows, their fine clothes and jewels glittering. The air was still and warm, smelling of exotic oils and clean metal. It was a place where nothing unexpected ever happened. That was why the arrival of the object caused such a stir. A low chime echoed through the vast space. A junior official in a plain gray robe hurried down the central aisle, his head bowed. He carried a small sealed container. It was not an imperial design. It was a simple gray human-made box, about the size of a large storage crate. It was marked with common shipping labels. He stopped at the base of the throne platform and knelt. "Your Magnificence," he said, his voice trembling. "A courier drone. It arrived from the Pyrrhus system. It bypassed all standard security channels. It is marked for your eyes only." Monarch Valerius looked down from his swirling platform of energy. His smooth face showed a flicker of annoyance. A package from the human frontier. It was probably a plea for mercy. Or perhaps a surrender. Lee Hana had finally seen reason. A feeling of satisfaction warmed him. He had been right to send the Cathar. The problem was solved. "Open it," he commanded, his voice echoing in the quiet room. The official stood up. His hands shook as he entered a code into the side of the box. The seals broke with a hiss. The lid of the container lifted a few inches, and a cloud of freezing white vapor poured out, spilling over the sides and pooling on the crystal floor. The cold air felt strange in the warm room. The official reached in and carefully removed the contents. He placed them on the floor in front of the throne. First, he took out a layer of soft, black fabric. Then, he lifted out the main object. It was a polished metal case. He opened the latches and lifted the lid. A gasp went through the rows of courtiers. It was not a controlled sound. It was a rush of shock and horror that they could not contain. Inside the case, resting on a bed of black velvet, were 2 heads. They were the heads of Kale and Rin. Their faces were perfectly preserved, their skin pale and waxy from the cold. Their black eyes were open, staring up at the ceiling with a fixed look of surprise and final understanding. There was no blood. The cuts were clean and surgical. They had been prepared with care. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It was a thick, choking silence. The courtiers stared, their mouths open. They could not believe what they were seeing. The Cathar siblings, the Monarch's own shadows, the most feared killers in the galaxy. They were here, returned like spoiled goods. Monarch Valerius did not move. He did not speak. His face for a moment was completely blank, as if his mind could not process the image. The satisfaction he had felt a moment ago turned to ice in his stomach. This was not surrender. This was not a plea. This was something else entirely. This was an insult. A challenge. His eyes, cold and dark, moved from the heads to the container. There was something else inside. A single small data chip resting between the two heads. It glinted in the light. He pointed a single long finger at it. "That," he said. His voice was a dry whisper. The official, his face white with terror, picked up the data chip. He scurried to a console at the side of the room and inserted it. A moment later, a holographic screen flickered to life in the air above the gruesome delivery. The image showed a room. It was a simple, functional command post. In the center stood General Lee Hanna. She was not in battle armor. She wore her simple uniform. Her hands were clasped behind her back. She looked directly into the camera. Her face was calm. There was no smile of victory. There was no look of anger. Her expression was serious and direct. Her eyes seemed to look right through the screen and into the throne room itself. "Monarch Valerius," she began. Her voice was clear and even. It was not loud, but every word was sharp and precise. "You sent killers to do a soldier's job. You wanted my head." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The courtiers stared, frozen. Valerius felt a hot prickling on his skin. He had never been spoken to in this way. Not by anyone. "You may try to take it," she continued. Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing supplies. "But know this. For everyone you send, I will send them back to you. My people have a long history of winning wars of attrition. We are stubborn, we are patient, we do not forget." She took a small step closer to the camera. Her gaze seemed to intensify. "Do not test our resolve." The recording ended. The screen went dark. The throne room was utterly silent. The only sound was the soft, pulsing hum of the crystal walls. The heads of Kale and Rin continued to stare sightlessly upward. Monarch Valerius sat perfectly still on his throne. The cold, controlled anger he usually felt was gone. In its place was a new, unfamiliar emotion. It was a cold knot of doubt. He had thrown a spear at this woman, and she had not only caught it, she had thrown it back, harder. He had tried to terrorize her, and she had answered with a terror of her own. She was not a noble warrior to be challenged. She was a force, a fact. She had turned his own brutal act into a message, and the message was simple. "I am not afraid of you." The courtiers watched him, waiting for his rage, for his commands, for the thunder that would surely follow this insult. But the thunder did not come. The monarch just sat there, staring at the box, his face unreadable. He had lost more than 2 assassins. He had lost the story. The galaxy would not hear about the fearsome monarch who crushed a rebellion. They would hear about the human general who sent back the heads of his killers and told him to try again. He had given her a symbol, and he had no idea how to take it back. The story did not travel through official news channels. It could not be stopped that way. It was a whisper, a rumor that moved faster than any starship. It traveled with traitors and smugglers. It was passed between soldiers in barracks and workers in spaceport cantinas. It was the kind of story people wanted to believe. They said a human woman, a general on a forgotten rock, had faced the monarch's personal demons. They said the Cathar, the silent death, had gone to kill her in the night. And they said she had not only beaten them, she had cut off their heads and mailed them back to the throne room. She had looked the galaxy monarch in the eye, through a camera, and told him to send more if he dared. On Pyrrhus, the mood was different. The rain still fell, but the air felt lighter. The soldiers walked with their heads a little higher. When they saw General Lee Hanna walking across the muddy yard, their salutes were sharper, their backs straighter. There was a new feeling on the base. It was not just hope, it was pride. Park Ji-hoon felt it. He stood with Hanna on a high observation platform, looking out at the busy base. Ground crews worked on fighter ships. Marines practiced drills in the rain. The air was filled with the sounds of industry and purpose. "The reports are coming in from other systems," Ji-hoon said. holding a data slate. The rebellion on Kestra has openly declared for our alliance. The free ships of the Jovan Belt are offering their support. Recruitment numbers from Earth and the colony worlds have doubled. They are all talking about what happened here. Hana listened, her eyes on the horizon. She did not look triumphant. She looked thoughtful. They are not joining because of me, Ji-hoon. They are joining because we proved something. We proved that he can be made to bleed, that his power is not magic. It is just force, and force can be met with greater force. They are calling it the Purist message, Ji-hoon said. Hana gave a small, rare smile. It was a tired smile. Good. A message is better than a battle sometimes. This one cost us very little, and it cost him a great deal. Back in the galactic core, the cost was becoming clear. The throne room was no longer a place of perfect order. The silence was nervous now. The courtiers watched Monarch Valerius, and they saw the cracks. They had seen the heads. They had heard the human woman's calm, challenging voice. The unshakable was shaking. Valerius sat on his throne, but he was no longer calm. His advisors presented him with plans for a new, massive fleet to crush Pyrrhus once and for all. But the words seemed to echo in the large room. For everyone you send, I will send them back to you. He thought about sending more assassins, better ones. But the thought felt hollow. What if she caught them too? What would she send back next? Time. The confidence he had always worn like a cloak felt thin and tattered. He had tried to use terror as a weapon. The human general had taken that weapon from his hands and shown him how to use it properly. She had understood a simple truth he had forgotten. True terror is not about power. It is about defiance. It is about showing that you are not afraid to lose, which makes you impossible to defeat. The throne room was the heart of an empire. It was a vast space with a ceiling so high it was lost in a soft, glowing light. The walls were made of a living crystal that pulsed with a gentle blue rhythm, like a slow heartbeat. This was the seat of power for Monarch Valerius, the ruler of all the known galaxy. He was ancient, his life extended by technologies so advanced they seemed like magic. His face was smooth and calm, but his eyes held the coldness of deep space. He sat on a throne that was not a chair but a swirling platform of light and energy. Below him, his advisors and courtiers stood in perfect rows, their fine robes and glittering jewels a display of the empire's immense wealth. They were silent, watching him. A large hologram, a map of the galaxy, floated in the air before the throne. Most of it glowed a peaceful, unified gold, but one sector, on the far-off spiral arm, burned a stubborn, angry red. An official in a silver robe stepped forward, his head bowed. "Your Magnificence, the report from the rimward frontier." "Speak," Valerius said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the enormous room. "The human resistance continues. They have ambushed the 7th Legion at the Pyrrhus system." The Legion was forced to retreat. A ripple of shock went through the courtiers. The 7th Legion was one of the best. A low murmur began, but it was cut off by the slightest lift of the monarch's finger. "Show me," Valerius commanded. The holographic map zoomed in on the red sector. It showed a star system with a single habitable planet, Pyrrhus. Icons of Imperial warships were shown pulling away from the planet, while smaller, more numerous human ships swarmed like angry insects. "How?" Valerius asked, his voice still dangerously calm. "Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are outdated. How does this keep happening?" The official trembled. "It is not their technology, Your Magnificence. It is their strategy. The human commander there, she does not fight by our rules. She uses the asteroids for ambushes. She lures our ships into the planet's radiation belts where our shields fail. She attacks our supply lines, not our warships. She is unpredictable." The name appeared in the hologram now, written in simple text below the planet Pyrrhus. General Lee Hana. Valerius stared at the name. Lee Hana. It was a simple name from a simple species on a backwater world. Yet this one woman was causing him more trouble than entire empires had in the past. Her successes were like a disease. Other fringe worlds, seeing that the mighty empire could be hurt, were starting to get ideas. They were starting to rebel. This could not be allowed. The empire was built on fear and absolute power. If fear was lost, everything would crumble. He had tried to crush her with fleets. It had not worked. He had tried to blockade her world. She had broken it. He needed a new solution, a simpler, more final one. The time for grand armies is over, Valerius said, his decision made. You break a snake by cutting off its head. You silence a rebellion by silencing its leader. He looked away from the hologram, towards the deepest shadows at the back of the throne room. Kyle, Rin, step forward. From the darkness, two figures emerged. They moved without a sound, their steps making no echo on the crystal floor. They were the Cathar siblings, the Monarch's personal blades. They were tall and slender, dressed in tight dark suits that seemed to drink the light. Their skin was pale and their eyes were completely black like pools of oil. They were shapeshifters, able to alter their appearance to look like anyone. They could walk through shadows and were masters of every form of killing. They were the most feared beings in the galaxy, and they belonged only to him. They stopped before the throne and bowed as one. You know of the human Lihana, Valerius said. They did not speak. They only nodded. Their silence was more frightening than any words. Your mission is simple. Go to Pyrrhus, infiltrate her base, find her, and kill her. Valerius leaned forward slightly, the energy of his throne crackling. I do not want a clean kill from orbit. I do not want an explosion. I want it to be personal. I want her to know in her final moment that she defied a god and lost. Bring me her head. I will display it in a crystal case for all the galaxy to see. Let it be a lesson. Let it be the final word. Kyle, the taller of the two, looked up. His black eyes met the Monarch's. He placed a fist over his chest in a salute of absolute obedience. Rin did the same. No orders were written down. No plans were discussed. The siblings knew what to do. They were the perfect weapon. They turned and walked back into the shadows, and as they did, they seemed to fade away, becoming one with the darkness until they were gone. The throne room was silent again. The courtiers were holding their breath. The official in the silver robe looked relieved. Monarch Valerius leaned back into his throne. He waved a hand, and the hologram of the troublesome red sector vanished. He allowed himself a small, cold smile. He had sent his best. The human woman was already dead. She just didn't know it yet. The problem of the Terran frontier would soon be solved, and order would be restored. He felt the familiar, comforting weight of absolute control settle back onto his shoulders. It was only a matter of time. The rain on Pyrrhus was not like rain on other worlds. It was thick and heavy, falling from a sky the color of dull iron. It hit the metal roofs and walkways of fire-based Tartarus with a constant drumming sound. The air was cold and carried the smell of wet metal and engine exhaust. Inside her command post, General Lihana looked over a data slate. The room was warm and lit by the soft glow of screens. Maps and lists of numbers scrolled across them. Hana was a woman who did not show much emotion. Her black hair was tied back in a simple way. Her uniform was clean but had no medals or decorations. The only sign of her rank was a single small pin on her collar. Her aide, a young man named Park Ji-hoon, stood nearby. He was looking at a different screen that showed the security feeds from around the base. He had a focused look on his face. He had been with Hana for a long time. He had learned to notice small things. General, Ji-hoon said. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the small room. Hana did not look up from her data slate. Yes, Ji-hoon? Perimeter sensor S7 on the southern ridge, he said. It glitched. Just for a moment. Less than a second. It registered a power drop. Then it came back online. Hana put the data slate down on the table. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark and calm. The storm? She asked. Probably, Ji-hoon said. The weather is bad. The winds are high. It could have been a lightning strike far away. It could be nothing. Hana was silent for a moment. She looked at the main screen, which showed a live map of the area around the base. The southern ridge was a jagged line of rock about 2 kilometers away. It was a good place to watch the base from. It was also a good place to hide, but... Hana prompted. She trusted Ji-hoon. He was careful. If he mentioned it, it was because his instincts were telling him something was wrong. But the pattern feels off, he said. It was a very clean drop. Not like a random power surge. It was like someone briefly interrupted the signal. Just long enough for something to pass by without being seen. Hana nodded slowly. She walked to the window and looked out at the falling rain. The base was busy. Soldiers in raincoats moved between buildings. Ground vehicles rolled through the mud. Everything looked normal. But she had been waiting for this. A ruler like Valerius, who thought he was a god, would eventually get tired of losing. He would stop trying to win a war and start trying to win a fight. He would send a knife in the dark. Condition Zeta, Hana said, her voice still calm. Quietly, no alarms. No panic, Ji-hoon nodded. He understood. He moved to his console and began typing. He did not send a general alert. Instead, he sent a coded message to a specific list of squad leaders and security officers. Across the base, things began to change without any obvious reason. A Marine patrol that was walking a regular route suddenly turned down a different alley. A team that was cleaning a heavy gun near the main gate stopped what they were doing and moved inside, their work forgotten. In the control room, a technician changed the scanning pattern of the automated turrets. They no longer swept back and forth in a steady rhythm. Now they paused, jittered, and looked in random directions. It was harder to predict their movements. Hana turned from the window. She picked up her data slate again, but she did not look at it. Her mind was working. She was thinking like the enemy. If she were an assassin, how would she get in? The southern ridge was the most likely entry point. It was far enough away to avoid the main sensors, but close enough to see the base layout. From there, they would have to cross open ground, probably under the cover of the storm and the night that was soon to come. She walked to a locker in the corner of the room. She opened it and took out a weapon. It was not a sleek plasma rifle like the ones her soldiers carried. It was an old-fashioned solid-slug pistol. It was heavy and blocky. It fired a piece of metal at high speed. It was a simple, brutal tool. She checked the mechanism, loaded a cartridge of bullets, and slid it into the holster on her hip. Ji-hoon watched her. "You think they are already here?" "I think they are close," Hana said. "Valerius is proud. He would not send ordinary soldiers. He would send his best, the ones who think they are ghosts." She looked at Ji-hoon. "Ghosts believe they cannot be seen. That makes them careless." She walked back to her desk and sat down. She appeared to go back to reading her reports. But her posture was different now. She was more still. Her right hand rested on the desk, near the grip of her pistol. She was not a general waiting for an attack. She was a hunter waiting in a blind. Outside, the rain continued to fall. The light began to fade as evening set in. The floodlights around the base flickered on, casting long, moving shadows through the downpour. The base was a fortress, but it was also a maze of dark corners and hidden pathways. Deep in the shadow of a storage container near the outer fence, the air seemed to ripple. It was a distortion so slight that no one would notice it unless they were staring right at it. The rain hit the spot and splattered in a way that was not quite right, as if it were hitting something solid that was not there. Two figures stood there, perfectly still. Kale and Rin had crossed the open ground from the ridge. Their adaptive suits had mimicked the colors of the rock and mud, making them nearly invisible. Now, inside the base, they used a different technology. A light-bending field wrapped around them, making them look like a shimmer in the air, a trick of the light. They watched the patrols. They saw the soldiers walk by, their heads down against the rain. It was all so simple. These humans were like animals, moving through their routines. They had no idea what was moving among them. Kale made a small hand signal to his sister. He pointed towards the largest structure in the center of the base, the command center. Their intelligence was clear. That was where the general would be. They began to move. They flowed from shadow to shadow, their movement silent and fluid. They avoided the main paths, sticking to the narrow spaces between buildings. They were like smoke. They passed within 10 meters of a Marine who was smoking a cigarette under an awning. He never looked up. They were confident. They had done this 100 times on 100 different worlds. They had killed kings in fortified palaces and warlords in crowded camps. This human base on this rainy rock was no different. They were the best, and their target was already dead. The command center was a quiet hum of activity, a sanctuary of warm light against the cold, rainy night outside. Through the main door, a soldier could see a single figure sitting in a chair, back turned, facing a large bank of glowing screens. The silhouette was unmistakable, the neat knot of hair, the shoulders set with authority. It was General Lee Hana. For Kale and Rin, Observing from a high, dark ventilation grate, it was a perfect gift. The arrogance of these humans, to think they were safe in the heart of their own base. They had grown complacent. It was a mistake that would cost the general her life. They moved like liquid darkness, slipping from the grate and dropping to the floor without a sound. The light-bending field around them made them little more than a heat shimmer in the air. They approached the seated figure from behind. Their monomolecular blades, sharper than any surgeon's tool, extended silently from the sheaths on their wrists. This would be quick. One strike to sever the spine, a second to take the head. Then, they would fade back into the shadows, their mission complete. They lunged as one. In that same instant, two things happened. The figure in the chair dissolved into a shower of harmless blue pixels. The holographic dummy flickered and died. At the same time, the heavy metal door of the command center slammed shut with a deafening final boom. The locks engaged with a series of heavy clunks. The lights did not just turn off. They died completely, plunging the room into an absolute suffocating blackness. A moment later, a low, powerful hum began, a sonic dampener that swallowed all sound. The drumming of the rain vanished. The hum of the computers vanished. The Cathar siblings could not even hear the sound of their own breathing. They were trapped in a silent, lightless box. Kale signaled to Rin with a sharp hand motion, a language they used for such situations. Trap. Find the door. They moved apart, their bodies pressed against the walls, feeling their way. Their eyes, capable of seeing in infrared, scanned the room. Nothing. The room was unnaturally cold, sapping their body heat and making them hard to see. The walls were lined with a material that scattered thermal signatures. They were not hunters anymore. They were prey. And the real hunter was in the room with them. General Lee Hanna had been standing in a recessed panel in the wall the whole time, perfectly still. She wore a simple set of combat goggles. They were not advanced. One lens showed a ghostly green image, a basic light amplification view. The other lens showed a motion sensor display, painting the room in ripples of light wherever something moved. She saw the two shimmering figures clearly now, their confusion obvious in their frantic, silent movements. She did not fight with honor. She fought to win. Her first move was not a shot, but a distraction. She rolled a small metal sphere across the floor. It made no sound. But to the Cathar, with their heightened senses, the vibration through the floor was like a thunderclap. Both of them spun towards it. It was the opening she needed. From the darkness to their side, a flashbang grenade detonated. In the utter silence, the effect was multiplied tenfold. A searing white light filled their light-sensitive eyes, and the concussive wave, even muffled, disoriented their balance. They stumbled, their forms flickering as they lost concentration. Hanna moved. She was fast and efficient. She raised her left arm not with a gun, but with a launcher that fired a weighted net. The cables were made of a high-tensile fiber, strong enough to hold a beast. It flew through the air and enveloped Rin. The moment the weights hit the floor, the net contracted, pulling her tight. She thrashed, her sharp blades trying to cut the strands, but the material was designed to resist slicing. Kale recovered first. He saw his sister trapped. His black eyes, blurry with tears from the flash, found Hanna's shape in the gloom. He let out a silent snarl of rage and charged, his blade aimed for her throat. Hanna didn't try to match his speed. She simply raised her right hand, which held her heavy, solid slug pistol. It was a weapon from a bygone era, considered primitive by galactic standards. But it had one advantage she was counting on. Personal shield technology was designed to disperse energy, to stop lasers and plasma bolts. It was less effective against a simple, solid piece of metal moving at high velocity. She did not aim for his well-armored chest. She aimed for his leading shoulder. She fired. The sound of the gunshot was a monstrous, shocking roar in the silent room. The bullet tore through Kale's personal shield with a crackle of overloaded energy. It punched into the joint of his shoulder, shattering bone and tissue. He spun with the impact, his charge turning into a graceless fall. He crashed to the floor, his weapon clattering from his numb fingers. He tried to get up, to push himself with his good arm, but a shadow fell over him. Hanna stood above him, her pistol now aimed at his head. Her face, seen through the goggles, was calm and utterly pitiless. There was no anger in her eyes, only a cold, professional finality. He looked past her, towards his sister. Rin had finally managed to cut one strand of the net, but it was too late. Two Marines, their own rifles equipped with specialized scopes, had entered through a hidden panel. They trained their weapons on the trapped assassin. The fight was over. It had lasted less than a minute. Hana reached down and pulled a small device from her belt. It was an auto-injector. She pressed it against Kale's neck. There was a hiss. A powerful sedative flooded his system. His struggling ceased, his body going limp. She did the same to Rin, who had finally stopped moving, her body slumping in the net. The lights in the command center came back on, soft and low. The sonic dampener switched off, and the sound of the rain returned, a steady drumbeat on the roof. The Marines moved in, quickly and professionally securing the two unconscious assassins with magnetic binders on their wrists and ankles. Park Ji-hoon entered, his face pale but his hands steady. He looked at the two legendary killers now lying helpless on the floor. One was bleeding onto the clean metal. The other was tangled in a net. He looked at General Hana. She had taken off her goggles. Her expression was the same as when she reviewed a supply report. She holstered her old pistol. "Get the medic to patch up his shoulder," she said, nodding at Kale. "I don't want them dying on us just yet. They have a journey to make." Ji-hoon nodded. "And after that?" Hana looked at the two bodies, her eyes cold. "Then we package our reply. We are going to send the Galaxy Monarch a message. We are going to send his knives back to him."